Hey there, Radiant Family. It's Pastor Manny and Carmel here with our very first Radiant Family moment. And we are so thrilled to be providing some videos for you to help strengthen you and your family. Our goal is to partner with you as you raise passionate followers of Jesus that will impact the world. And today, I am thrilled and excited. We've got an amazing guest to kick this whole thing off, Arlene Pellicane, and she is going to be talking about screen time, which is, well, it's one of those topics that, well, it may not feel comfortable because once we start talking about our kids and screen times, we have to take some reflection and talk about ourselves. Arlene, it's so great to have you.
It's so much fun to be together. Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your family before we dive into everything else.
Yes, so we get it. We are on online school. I have a 16-year-old junior. His name is Ethan. A 14-year-old Noelle. She is in 9th grade. And Lucy is 11, and she's in 6th grade.
Wow. And so when it comes to this world and screen time, you are familiar with it, and you've got to have the same battles as everybody else.
Yeah, we're like everybody else. We're like in our houses, and Ethan is got the downstairs area, and he's like in his little nook. And then Noelle's upstairs in another room. She's actually in her brother's bedroom, which is funny because her sister is in the bedroom that they share. Nice. And then everybody's at their computer, and then my husband James, he's a realtor, he's on his computer, and I work from home as an author. I'm on my computer. So it's like we see each other at breakfast, and then it's like, all right, go, and everybody goes to their spot. We meet again for lunch.
Well, I love that because what we're going to talk about is a very real thing, and we have to address it. I mean, it is something that we can't run away from, especially post-COVID. This is our new reality. And I think one of the things you said in the book was 3 billion people are under the age of 25 here in the world. And the thing that really differentiates them is the word technology. Talk to us about that.
Yes. Yeah, they did a report where Barna asked parents, how difficult is it to parent today? And most people said it's more difficult today because of technology. Because technology, it's part of life, but it's too central in the life of a family. And so when you have a teenager who's maybe spending, 9 hours plus a day on a device, and now you have kids younger and younger on devices, whether before the pandemic, kids under 9, maybe they're spending 2 hours on entertainment. You can only imagine now how many hours they're spending on entertainment. So it's becoming an issue. But don't worry if your child is doing school online right now and you're wondering like, oh my word, is my child going to be addicted because of the online school? The studies have shown online school is a lot different than playing video games, TikTok, social media, watching videos. That's a lot different. Yeah. And you know that because no child is sneaking around in the middle of the night like, let me get to my calculus class because I just want to solve that problem.
That is so true.
After kids are 100% back to normal and in school, nobody's going to be like, oh, I just need to get to Zoom. I'm going to wake up extra early and get a little bit of Zoom time in. No one's going to have to struggle with that. So breathe easy if you're wondering about the online school, but it's the other stuff. It's the entertaining stuff. That's what you have to think about.
And it's giving those kids a break, too, because they're doing all that online school time. And then their break time, they want to play some games. So it's learning to manage that.
Yes.
I'm really excited to really get into this, and there's skills that you address and how to equip our kids to be productive adults in the society, even with technology. But there are real facets of technology and how it affects our kids that I'd love to go through, especially regarding the time. I mean, our kids are spending more time than ever online. I think the statistics where you had said over 2 hours a day for kids 9 and younger. For teenagers, 7 hours? I mean, what's happening
and
with our kids?
That's not school. That's just, online time afterwards. And so you just think of, for the brain, whatever is being wired together, whatever is continually being used, it's just like a muscle. So it's like, okay, I am going to be close-knit to my device versus being close-knit to my family, right? And here we're all about family ministry. And the thing is, you need time together as a family. But now that time that's normally spent maybe having a meal, playing a game, even watching something together, that's even different than everyone being on their own devices. And so we really have to think of what's happening in my child's brain and how are they connecting with their device versus how they're connecting with me as a parent,
It's really good.
siblings, other friends.
Yeah. There's a phrase you use, digital candy versus digital vegetables.
Yes.
I mean, I love that because it helps us really start to part the waters when it comes to this, because we can make this a blanket statement.
Yep.
And the irony is we're online right now. You're watching this on a device and you can say, well, isn't this a paradox? Like, you're asking us to watch this online, but yet, and you referred to that earlier, but can you dive a little deeper into that whole idea of candy versus vegetables?
Totally, because you might feel like, oh, they're such hypocrites.
Right.
They're like talking about screen time, and here we are
on.
online talking to each other. And so truly think of screen time, that all screen time is not created equal.
Yeah.
So if your child is watching Pastor Todd preach a sermon online, that's a lot different than them watching, TikTok videos. Like, there is something different happening. And so you really have to think of content. And so one thing that's really helped me is, I love chocolate. Yeah. And if I walked around the house with a big family-sized bag of M&Ms, and believe me, the reason I'm saying this story is because I had hidden a family-sized bag of M&Ms and would just hit that thing every few days,
Yes.
So if I have that access, I'm going to eat it.
Yeah.
And if someone said to me, well, you can carry around the bag of M&Ms with you, but just eat 20 a day.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to do that. And that's what a digital candy, that's what it's like. So if you tell your child, just play for 15 minutes, but you find they can't play for 15 minutes, then you can picture, it's like saddling a big bag of M&Ms to their waist and being like, hey, dude, just good luck with that all day. Just eat a few.
Yeah.
And so digital candy, that's the stuff that's fun, that's amusing. It blows up and it has a different level. And you're wondering, did they like the photo? It's social media, it's YouTube. It's always queuing up the next thing. So think of how TV used to be. The program, when we were younger, the program would end. And then there'd be commercials. And you'd have to wait a whole week, right? A whole week. So now it's candy and it's the whole season. You can watch it and you have to choose not to watch the next yummy looking candy,
It's really good.
So you have to think of it like, I have to limit my child's digital candy.
Yes.
But then digital vegetables, if your child is Skyping grandma, if your child is creating something, my daughter, she's in 9th grade and she and her friend are learning how to play the guitar together. So once a week, they're getting together for an hour and learning how to play the guitar. And so she'll borrow my phone and she'll watch things. And so that, to me, that's a digital vegetable. You have a specific purpose. It's not really, addictive. You can tell because when it's candy and it's addictive, you see this is causing negative consequences.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when it's a vegetable, okay, not really that many negative consequences of Skyping grandma or talking to a parent who's on a business trip. There are no negative consequences for that. So it's pretty easy. And once you can think of it that way, it helps you discern. Should I be telling you to get off? Or should I be like, okay, take another 10 minutes?
Yeah.
And even with really little kids, you can talk this way with a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old. Is this digital candy? Is this good for your brain?
Yes.
Is this going to make you strong? Is this help you love Jesus?
like
You
that.
can talk in that way. And a child can even say oh, that's digital candy. And if you're really bold, your kids, you can give them permission to call you out, to be like, oh, look, daddy's doing work, digital vegetables. Oh, look, daddy's checking his stock, prices for the 10th
We
time
may have
today.
crossed the line here, calling out
that
adults.
could be
Really
candy
good.
because you've
That's
looked at it
really
10
good.
times today, daddy.
Yeah.
So you have those kinds of conversations in your home, and I think that's really helpful.
I love that setup of
very good.
accountability. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that in other segments about that. It starts with us. But there are consequences. I love the candy analogy because we all love candy, but there are consequences to overdoing candy. And there are consequences that are affecting, on a foundational level, I want to have this conversation about the brain. Like, it affects our kids. And some of the things that you shared in the book about how early some of the stuff happens is
It's scary.
startling. Yeah.
Very
Totally.
scary.
Yeah, so if you're watching and you have young kids, 5 and younger, then it's your time to be really diligent to say, okay, I need my child to be able to read, to be able to love and feel love, to be connected to people, to have good motor skills. And so especially from birth to age 2, where so much brain activity is happening, doctors want those babies to be talking in real life because they're learning language. And the way they learn language is that they're spoken to. And it's the same thing whether they're 2 or they're 12. I mean, we're still all learning. And the way you learn how to communicate is by being spoken to. And then you respond. But when there's a TV present or a device present, what ends up happening, even if it's just for background noise, is in study after study, the communication, the talking diminishes.
Yeah.
Because if there's no screen involved, what are you doing as a parent? You're changing a diaper and you're like, oh, look at you, got the chubby legs, and is that too tight? You know, and that's how we parent, we're talking. But when you say, oh, let me multitask and let me feed the baby and get caught up on the news at the same time, that seems like, oh, I'm multitasking. But what's happening? Now I'm not talking to my baby and they're not being spoken to, and their language, they're not getting practice. So for children, young children, it's so important. Let them sit in the shopping cart without a screen so they can see like the real apple instead of just the iPad apple, you know. That's super important for brain development. And so you see kids, you know, 40% uptick in ADHD, and you see that because so many kids are not learning language, they're not learning self-control, because what happens in the brain is when you're playing a video game, your body, it's like flooding with dopamine. It's super exciting, a lot of pleasure, like a ride. It's like, wow, so all this dopamine is firing. And then it's this fight or flight, like you're in trouble, like you gotta get out of there. And so your body is like sending blood to all the basic organs. Let's get this kid healthy, let's get his heart beating. And it's just all these really basic things in the body. And so the blood is not in the prefrontal cortex. And that's that special thing that God gave us as people, where we can kind of think about what we're thinking about. You know, the other creatures maybe can't do that. But our prefrontal cortex, that's the part that's self-control. That's emotional regulation. That's, hey, I've been sitting here for 3 hours and I probably should go to the bathroom. That's the executive center that's still being formed until age 25. And so when your kid is on video games, your kid is on social media, all the blood flow is going to different parts, and that decision-making part, it's like a muscle. It's being starved. And so what you see is kids might be really good at gaming, and so people will say, oh, well, that'll help their brain because they can like think about things really quickly, or they can respond. So hey, if your kid's gonna go into combat, sincerely, that might really help them. But in the real world, most kids are what? They're going to school to sit down and listen to an instructor, and they're going to do math, and they're going to read books, and they're going to write essays. And those parts of the brain have been starved because they haven't had to use those parts of the brain. So that prefrontal cortex of decision making, that's formed when they have to learn self-control. And self-control is, hey, read that book for half an hour. I don't want to. Well, hey, there's no other option, buddy. So read the book for half an hour and then come talk to me. It's play, playtime. You know, it's so ridiculous. Before our time, before the advent of the mobile phone, you never had to talk about, hey, let's have the kids play. Kids are really good at playing.
Imagination.
But now kids are like, they need to be directed. What am I supposed to do? Like, we don't have a device present. We don't know what to do.
So bored.
We're so bored. And so when a child learns how to be imaginative and play, the brain is now learning the self-control of, hey, we're gonna play, you're playing a group of 4. We're gonna play astronaut. Okay, you be the astronaut. I'll be the person that sends you off in the shuttle. And they're learning the self-control of the rules of the game. You didn't get the role that you wanted, so you have to figure that out. Someone did something to make you mad. You have to not explode. All of these things are really important skills for a brain to learn. And kids used to be doing this every day for hours, every day, learning how to talk to each other, learning how to have self-control. But now they're not doing that. And we're seeing just the terrible repercussions. If you ask a school teacher, you ask a parent how they're doing with their homework, it's hard, it's a struggle. And that's a lot of why.
I feel like part of what I hear you saying is there's not just a deterioration physically, but even in social interaction.
Yeah.
It's something that we may not be noticing, but when you talk about kids playing, there's social structure that's being learned in that playtime. There's the idea of learning how to dialogue, how to have an argument, how to role play, and
Yeah.
Share.
and that's not happening
Yeah.
when we have devices.
Look around. Like, so when kids are on devices, you're interacting with that device, and when you're talking to each other, you're probably talking about what's on the device, and so the old communication has given way to this new communication, and it's not doing the job of the old communication, and that's why you see a lot of kids struggling with anxiety and with depression.
Anxiety and depression is something that I want to spend some time in a future segment talking about, because it really is affecting our kids. You mentioned the 5 and younger. There's a lot that you address in the book that can be hard to hear. What about for the parent that has a teenager?
Yeah.
Is it too late? Have they crossed the line and whatever we've got, we've got?
It's never too late. And so with technology, it's always easier if your kids are younger. It's the idea that if you do the hard now, what feels hard now, it'll be much easier for you and your children as they grow up. And it's also the inverse is true. If you do, hey, it's much easier to have them. They're safe. They're on their iPad. Let's just do that. If it's easy now, you'll find it's harder later. So the sooner you start, the better, but there's no better time than today, right? Today is the soonest date you've got and we've all got. And so as long as you have a teenager in the home, it's not too late. And it may sound like an apology. It may, you're not going to come in and say, I watched this family radiant moment video, and here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take away your phone, and you're going to start talking to me. That's probably not going to be the most wonderful approach. But if it's, I've really been thinking about this, and I realize that the phone 24 hours a day, probably not the healthiest thing for you, and I want to apologize to you because I've allowed that to happen. And so let's talk about it. When do you feel good when you use your phone? When do you find it wastes your time? When do you find it kind of depletes you, makes you feel depressed? When do you feel out of control? Like, I'd like to stop, but I don't know how. Have these kinds of conversations and express your concern. I think that's a great way to start. And then I think for teenagers, just talk about from a sleep perspective and just say, you know what, it's really important. I know you may not understand it now, but it's really important for you to get 9 hours of sleep. Like, you will be a much better, happier, healthier human being if you get 9 hours of sleep. So we're going to collect your phone overnight. And no kid's going to be like, you're right. One Satan out there might be like, thank you. No one's going to say you're right. You're going to get in a big fight. It's going to be awful. It's going to be ugly. But maybe a week later, maybe a month later, maybe a year later, your kid's going to come to you and they're going to say, you know what? That's really helped me. Like, I feel a lot better and I feel healthier now that I'm sleeping, and I want to thank you. And so our job as parents is to kind of assess for my teenager, is this device helping you? And for many teenagers, it's like, wow, that's the linchpin. If we could get that under control, you would feel so much happier and healthier, and I want to help you do that as a parent. And even if you're a senior in high school, it is not too late for me to step in and to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
This jumps a little bit books, but that Parents Rising, we have to take ownership in this, and we have to be willing not to be best friends with our kids, and this will be tough conversations. Okay, real quick, are there warning signs? I mean, as we're looking, because sometimes we're caught up in our own world, and we may feel guilty asking our kids to do something we have a hard time. But are there warning signs that might help provoke us to go, we have issues?
Yes, there are definitely warning signs, and you'll find them listed in the book Screen Kids. But if you see your child, a child that used to be enthusiastic about art or biking or something, a hobby, and then now you're saying, hey, let's go biking, and they're like, I'd rather play games, or I'm going to be on social media. Then like, okay, this is a problem. If you see, hygiene slipping, that you're like, okay, you used to kind of look clean, and you don't look that clean anymore. If you see their grades slipping, they used to care, they used to try, and you see this is not happening. They're moody, they're irritable. They're only happy when they're with their device. These are all warning signs. They can't take a break. So if you say, hey, we're gonna take an afternoon and go do this, and they like bring their phone with them and they can't break away. If you say, we're gonna do like a digital Sabbath, we're gonna go 6 hours without any screens, and they can't do it, then you know, okay, there's a problem. So there are things like this that you can be looking for. And with gaming, especially with video gaming, you can ask the question, you know, are they casual? Which means, hey, my kid can play for 20 minutes, walk away, no big deal. And then they might not ask for several days and then be like, hey, you want to play this game? Sure. Like there are kids who can game and it's not a problem at all. The at-risk gamer is like, oh, I played today, and they're asking, hey, can I play a little bit more? Can I play a little bit more? And then you realize they used to ask like every other day to play the game, but now they're asking every single day, can I play the game? Then you think, okay, we're kind of starting to push a line. And then your addicted person is like, when you say, hey, it's time for dinner, and they're like, I'm good, or I'll be there in a minute, and they're playing their game. Like it's disrupting what they should be doing. Then you know, okay, this is a problem. And so you can ask yourselves these questions and be honest. You know, this isn't a judgment or a shame thing. We're like, oh, you should be very ashamed if you have a, no. You're just trying to assess like, where is my child and how can I help them and how can I be looking for these warning signs?
That's good. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And there is so much. It almost already feels like a fire hose of information. But the good news is that Arlene shared in our weekend service an amazing message that you can refer back to by going to radiantchurch.org and looking at the service online. But there are also online resources that she has available for us. Arlene, would you tell us where we can learn more?
Yes, absolutely. So I come up with some master classes around my books, and you can go to happyhomeuniversity.com to check that out. To learn more about Screen Kids, which I've co-authored with Dr. Gary Chapman, you can go to screenkidsbook.com. And then also I have a podcast called the Happy Home Podcast, and I'm always interviewing marriage people, parenting people, so that's a fun way to stay connected.